Welcome to the Let's Grow Together 10-minute university presentation on how to make your own compost. Whether you are already using a composting system and are looking for ways to improve or expand it, or you want to learn how to get started, this information may help you think about composting just a little bit differently. Before we talk about the various ways you can make and use compost in your garden, we'll talk about what compost is, go over the basics of the composting process, how it works. Then we'll review the many benefits, some of which may surprise you. There are many methods to use. Selecting the right one depends on your needs, how much space you have, and how much time and work you want to invest. We'll examine the advantages and disadvantages of different methods and walk through the how-tos of traditional composting, hot composting, vermiculture, gardening in place, and green composting with cover crops. What is compost? Yard trimmings, grass clippings, leaves, garden refuse, even certain kitchen scraps can all be turned into compost, which is partially decomposed organic matter. It's transformed by hungry garden organisms into humus, a carbon-rich organic matter. Humus is an important element of healthy soil. In this presentation, soil organic matter and humus are used interchangeably and are similar in purpose and function. Compost makes use of yard and kitchen waste. Homemade or backyard compost includes materials that are high in carbon, like dried leaves, straws, and twigs. Other materials, greens, are high in nitrogen and include kitchen scraps and grass cuttings. If you have chickens, your compost may include manure. However, there are special considerations when making compost that includes manures, which we'll review in a few minutes. There are many benefits of composting at both large and small scales. For home gardeners, the main benefit of adding compost to your garden is that it helps create and maintain healthy soil by adding organic matter and soil organisms into the garden soil. Composting helps reduce erosion, conserves water, can reduce pests and diseases, and overall improve the health of your garden. How do kitchen scraps and yard debris turn into nutrient-rich garden amendment in a compost pile? Let's take a look. Human-managed composting systems are methods by which we speed up nature's decomposition of plant material. Decomposition is performed by microorganisms, earthworms, small insects, and other soil-inhabiting creatures. What we do by speeding up the process is providing conditions in which these organisms thrive. To create compost, we input green and brown waste materials from our kitchens and yards. Microorganisms feed on the nitrogen and carbon in the raw materials. Consuming nitrogen provides them energy. The browns in the system add bulk to the pile, creating pockets for air and water, which the micro and macroorganisms need to thrive and to reproduce. Water helps them digest the materials, and they need oxygen to breathe. Compost needs the right balance of air and moisture to decompose efficiently. Too much water and the microbes can't function. Too little and the process stalls. A compost pile with the right amount of moisture should be like a wrung-out sponge. Let's take a deeper look at what's happening in a compost pile. It's a biochemical process, meaning that decomposition takes place as a result of biological life, soil organisms, breaking the chemical bonds of organic matter as they feed. Microscopic organisms such as bacteria, actinomycetes, and fungi secrete enzymes and absorb the broken down forms of nitrogen and carbon. Larger macroorganisms feed on microorganisms and soil organic matter, breaking the material down even further into smaller and smaller pieces, which eventually become humus. Our goal when composting is to create optimal conditions for these organisms to thrive and do the work of recycling our organic waste into nutrient-rich humus for our gardens. And these organisms are not only beneficial in a compost pile, but they continue to do their work when we transfer compost to our garden soils, creating an environment that supports healthy plants. The compost food web has 3 levels of decomposers who break down raw organic material into nutrient-rich compost. Here we see earthworms, pillbugs, sow-bugs, and fungi are 3 of those primary decomposers that eat organic matter. Secondary decomposers eat organic matter, breaking it down into smaller pieces, plus they feed on the primary decomposers. This little cutie is a springtail, and it can jump 60 times their body length, which is only 2 inches because they're only about 1/8 of an inch long. The only way you might spot them is when they jump around when soil is disturbed. These critters are consumers, and if you see them in the garden, you should be happy because these are signs of healthy garden soil. On the left is a ground beetle larva, and on the right, a centipede. Both are consumers, meaning they are predatory and eat the primary and secondary decomposers. In their digestive systems, the soil organic matter is further broken down into yet smaller pieces, so these critters too are part of the decomposition process. Composting is an aerobic process, meaning that it requires oxygen in order for the organisms to be able to break down the materials in the pile. Air can be provided by stirring or mixing the compost pile. Mixing restores pore space so that air can move through the pile more easily. Nutrient balance in a compost pile expressed by the ratio of carbon to nitrogen. Composting is usually successful when the pile contains 20 to 40 parts of carbon per part of nitrogen. The ideal ratio is 25 to 1, or in simpler terms, 3 parts brown to 1 part green. If the ratio is too low, excess nitrogen is converted to ammonia and escapes into the atmosphere, causing unpleasant odors. If the ratio is too high, the rate of decomposition slows. The moisture content of the pile ideally should be around 60% after original mixing. When the moisture content is more than 60%, oxygen movement is inhibited and the process becomes more anaerobic. Below 40%, the rate of decomposition decreases rapidly. Compost must be regularly watered so it is not too dry, or may need to be covered in winter if it is too wet. As a general rule, a mixture with 50% moisture will feel damp to the touch, but not soggy. Another general rule is that the higher the temperature of the pile, the more quickly the material would decompose. Nitrogen-rich materials or greens include kitchen scraps, green materials from your yard, hair and fur, and even manures from herbivores. There are many sources of carbon-rich materials. Exclude anything with plastic in it. Pieces should be small or they will take longer to break down. 2-inch pieces are recommended. Be sure to avoid anything with chemicals on them. Cloth could be cut into strips and paper shredded into smaller pieces to expedite decomposition. Some urban gardeners keep chickens, and the manure is nutrient rich. Can you use compost on your garden beds? Chicken manure can be a valuable addition to composting, but it will harm or kill plants if placed directly on the soil. High level of salts create a higher concentration of salts outside root systems than inside, reversing the process of water absorption. Instead of roots absorbing water, the manure draws water out of the roots, dehydrating the plants. If you are planning to compost manure, follow these guidelines provided by OSU. Hot composting is recommended for chicken manure. Here's some things that are not recommended for a compost pile. These items can impede decomposition, attract pests, cause unwanted things to grow, add toxins, or introduce diseases. They will also cause an unpleasant odor. Compost is one of the best ways to build healthy soil. It's generally free to produce, it's nutrient rich, and can have a positive impact on the environment. So why compost? Decomposition of organic materials is nature's way of recycling waste materials. Composting is one of the most powerful actions that we can take in our communities to reduce our trash in landfills and at the same time build healthy soils. By turning our food scraps and yard trim into compost, we transform our waste streams into a beneficial value-added soil amendment. Composting is a resourceful way to recycle the food scraps and yard trim you generate at home all year long. It's a way to manage your waste more sustainably because you reduce the volume of materials might otherwise be disposed of in landfills or in trash incinerators such as leaves, grass clippings, yard trim, and food scraps. There are many ways to compost that involve minimal effort, equipment, expense, and expertise, and it can be really fun and satisfying. You save money by producing a free, high-quality soil amendment, which can help you reduce use of fertilizers and pesticides. For urban gardeners, the number one benefit of adding compost to the garden beds is that it improves soil structure and nutrient availability to plants. Compost helps bind soil particles together into aggregates, which contain pore space, air pockets, and pathways in the soil that hold and move water and air through the system. Adding compost is especially valuable for soils that are low in organic matter or for vegetable beds where nutrients are regularly extracted by harvesting crops. Increased organic matter in soil enhances water holding capacity. Organic matter binds onto clay particles, creating soil aggregates that have pore spaces which channel water. And in clay soils, this is really important because it improves drainage. Organic matter in soils holds onto water, allowing for better water retention and lateral distribution, preventing from instantly draining away when used in sandy soils. Compost introduces and feeds beneficial bacteria, fungi, and worms. These organisms break down complex organic matter, converting nutrients into plant-usable forms. The decomposition process also produces humic acid, which helps weather mineral particles in the soil, unlocking more micronutrients. Adding compost makes nutrients more available to plants in several ways. Most compost has a neutral pH of 6 to 8. Therefore, it buffers soil that is too acidic or too alkaline, keeping the pH in the ideal range for maximum nutrient uptake by plants. That is the benefit of compost. The soil food web breaks down organic matter into accessible nutrients. Compost acts as a nutrient reservoir, holding essential elements like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are slowly released to plants as the microorganisms feed on the organic matter. Organic matter in soil also holds significantly more micronutrients than minerals like sand and clay. Humus acts like a sponge that attracts, holds, and releases vital nutrients like calcium, magnesium, and zinc. Humus binds nutrients via chelation and ion bonding process and prevents them from washing away. Plants extract the nutrients by secreting enzymes that release the bonds and absorb these nutrients as they uptake water through their root systems. By adding compost to soils, we increase the diversity, type of, and abundance, the number or population of micro and macroorganisms such as fungi and types of bacteria that form nitrogen-fixing nodules and legumes, for example. These bacterial nitrogen-fixing nodules transform atmospheric nitrogen, which plants cannot uptake, into ammonia, a form of nitrogen that plants can use. This is just one specific example of how soil organisms benefit plants. There are two ways that compost helps suppress outbreaks of pests and diseases. The beneficial organisms feed on many types of pest and disease organisms. The feeding keeps pest populations in check. Plus, importantly, healthy soil grows healthy plants, and healthy plants are more resilient and resistant to pests and diseases. The way to create resilient plants is to have healthy soil, and compost is key to soil health. Compost provides essential plant nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, offsetting the need for synthetic and mined fertilizers like ammonia and superphosphates. These manufactured fertilizers are carbon intensive to produce, and their overuse can result in nutrient pollution in surface and groundwater. Using compost in place of these fertilizers can reduce the risk of nutrient runoff. However, compost is an amendment, not a fertilizer, and does not always contain enough concentrations of nutrients in plant available forms to satisfy the needs of some crops. Some annual crops which may require the addition of an organic nitrogen fertilizer like blood or feather meal. Compost can immobilize heavy metals in contaminated soil. Aluminum ions bind to organic matter. Compost with high iron content can help immobilize lead and arsenic, which are common pollutants in urban soils. Adding compost supports a microbial community that can break down toxic compounds like pesticides, petroleum products, and polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. This is a process called bioremediation. Compost supports the growth and improves the survival rate of plants that extract pollutants in contaminated environments. This process is called phytoremediation. A local example, on the McCormick and Baxter Superfund site in Portland, hybrid poplar trees are used to treat deep aquifer contamination, acting as nature's pump and treat system to prevent contaminated groundwater from entering the Willamette River. Phytoremediation techniques are also used along the 100 North area riparian zone of the Columbia River to reduce strontium-90 radioactive waste from the Hanford nuclear plant, using vegetation to absorb the contamination in the soil. Some heavy metals like copper and zinc are removed from the soil by moving it up into the plant tissue. Compost can be used throughout your garden to improve soil quality. Used as a soil amendment for vegetable beds, add 1 to 1.5 inches on top of the soil. Mix it in lightly to the top 1 inch of soil, being careful not to mix too deeply or you break down the soil structure. You can add 1.5 or an inch to ornamental beds every year or two to provide an injection of organic matter and organisms. Here's a key tip. If you garden in raised beds or pots, compost will introduce microorganisms into what otherwise may be sterile potting mix. This will improve the water holding capacity of the potting mix and reduce the need for fertilizers. Now that you may be more convinced than ever to begin composting or to refine your composting techniques, let's look at the various methods of composting and how you might employ one or maybe even several of these in your urban garden. There are many ways you can add compost to your garden. You can buy it in bags at many stores. You can buy it by the truckload from local amendment suppliers. Both of these cost money, and there is a risk with buying compost in bags and bulk. There is potential material in the compost that you don't want in your garden, like PCBs, heavy metals, pesticides, and herbicides. Many of these, including the herbicide 2,4-D, can survive the composting process and may persist in some purchased compost, particularly if it's manure-based. The herbicide residues and the high salt concentrations in some purchased compost can dehydrate plants and introduce weed seeds or pathogens if the compost has not been adequately heated. An alternative then is to do it yourself. Making your own compost reuses waste materials from your yard and kitchen, keeping them out of landfills, which we've already talked about. Depending on the process you use, there is minimal to no expense. Plus, you have control over what you put in your compost. If you use no herbicides on your property, your compost should be safe from herbicides. If you have a neighbor who uses herbicides, however, locate your compost pile away from where the spray may drift. To get prepared to start composting, develop a method to collect your raw materials. To keep food scraps in your kitchen from having odors, get a bin with a lid and empty it every 2 days, or put your food scraps in a freezer. For your brown materials, choose a space outdoors where you can begin collecting twigs, leaves, and other carbon-rich materials to mix with your food scraps. Smaller pieces will break down faster. The more surface area exposed to microorganisms, the faster the material will be consumed. However, you can screen larger pieces out of the final product if you prefer, and we'll show you a method coming up. Locate your compost pile in a place that is easy to access and has good drainage. You'll want access to a water source to keep your compost moist. The decomposition process will happen whether it's in the sun or in the shade. You can you can choose to make or buy a bin or just make a compost pile on the soil. Choose a compost method that fits your gardening needs, most importantly. Make your choices based on how much space you have and the time you have to invest in the composting process. First, we'll look at methods of traditional or cold composting. If you are just getting started with composting, cold composting is a way to begin. Buy a commercially available bin or make a pile on the soil. Experiment with the process and modify as you learn what works best for you. Cold composting can be done in a bin or a pile on the ground. Pile browns and greens using the 3-to-1 ratio. Placing coarse sticks on the bottom will provide better aeration. Continue to add to the pile and let the materials slowly break down over time. If you use a 3-bin system, you can transfer the material from one bin to the next every month or so. This adds air and speeds the decomposition process. Be sure to water your pile regularly. Whether you choose to use a bin or create a pile on the soil, this method requires very little maintenance or monitoring. There's no special tools that are needed other than a pitchfork to turn the pile. Cold composting is a fairly slow process. It can take up to a year to have usable compost if you just let the compost sit on the ground. You may end up with larger pieces in your pile at the end of the process, which you can remove if you wish. You can speed this process by turning the pile occasionally. Often piles of compost with kitchen scraps exposed can attract rodents, which can be a barrier, but it's easy to remedy by covering your pile with brown materials. The 3-bin composting system can be used to make cold or hot compost in any urban garden. Here is one resource below that provides directions on how to construct a 3-bin composting system. There are many resources available, including videos. Choose one that's easiest for you to follow, or you can buy these systems. To keep out the critters like this cute but invasive brown rat from getting into your compost, line the bottom of the bin system with a 1/4-inch hardware cloth. To begin, put down a layer of 4 to 6 inches of twigs and wood chips, layer your browns and greens, and to initially inject your pile with microbes and speed up the decomposition process, you can add a layer of soil to your garden from your garden. Add 1 inch of soil for every 6 to 8 inch of greens and browns to get the pile started. But soil holds a lot of water, so be sure your pile is not too wet. If it's holding too much water, add more browns and let the pile go. Single bins are a great way to begin if you have limited space. You can buy plastic bins like the one shown on the right. Some are supplied by government agencies to encourage backyard composting. There is less air circulating in a plastic bin, and it's difficult to turn materials. You can buy or make a single bin with wood and wire as an alternative. Learning how to troubleshoot problems with your compost pile is key. The things that need to change are generally the ratio of browns to greens, lack of water, or too much water. Let's take a look at some common problems and their solutions. If you have a strong rotten egg smell, maybe not enough oxygen and too much moisture, the pile is producing hydrogen sulfide gas, which is what the smell is, and decomposition has stalled. When there isn't enough oxygen, the solution is to turn the pile. If there's too much moisture, keep it dry or cover it with a tarp lid. If the pile is too dry, add bulky material, straw, and dry leaves. If you smell an ammonia smell, that means not enough oxygen and too much nitrogen. Again, the solution to not enough oxygen is turning the pile. Too much nitrogen, add some browns. If your decomposition is too slow, the pile may be too small, so add some more ingredients. Add browns and greens. You may also try adding a little soil. If it's too dry, add water. If it needs oxygen, turn the pile. These are all ways to jumpstart a pile that's slowly decomposing. What if the pile is too hot in hot composting? That means there's too much nitrogen. Add browns, add water, turn the pile. If the hot compost pile is losing heat, it's not getting enough oxygen. Turn the pile, add browns, add water. What if it's attracting flies or gnats or even other types of pests? Maybe your greens are exposed. Cover the greens with browns. How do you know when your compost is ready to use? Here are some indicators. The material at the bottom has no remnants of food or yard trimmings. With hot compost, the pile begins to cool because the bulk of the material has been consumed. When the food source diminishes, the organisms are producing less energy in the form of heat. The compost will be rich brown material and smell earthy. Placing a small amount of the compost in a plastic bag and taking a whiff before sealing the bag will tell you how it smells and if it smells earthy. If you open it after a few days and it still smells earthy, it's good to go on your garden. If you have a lot of large pieces remaining in your compost, create a compost sifter. Build a sturdy wooden frame from 2x4s or 2x3 lumber and attach galvanized quarter or half-inch hardware cloth using staples. A popular design is a 2x3 foot or 2x4 foot rectangle that you put over a wheelbarrow so you're sifting the compost into the wheelbarrow. Hardware cloth is secured to the bottom. Here's a video that you can use as a resource for making your own. If you want to produce compost more quickly and you have the right material, space, and time, hot composting may be worth considering. Hot compost is a good solution if you want to include materials with seeds in your composting system, you have manure to compost, or perhaps you have a need for a lot of compost to improve poor soil quality, or you want to restore nutrients in areas where you grow vegetables year after year and want to cut down on the use of manufactured fertilizers. You may have pathogens that you're trying to kill. That is another reason to use hot composting. Hot composting is a process of rapid decomposition that takes place at high temperatures. This decomposition is performed mostly by bacteria adapted to working at very high temperatures that break down organic matter quickly and efficiently. Hot composting allows for faster production of larger amounts of compost, but keep in mind the temperature needs to be between 130 to 160 degrees, with the temperature of hot water in your house being about 120. So it takes work and time to achieve those temperatures, and often those temperatures are only achieved in the core of the pile. A hot compost pile must be at least 3 by 3 by 3 with a maximum of 5 by 5 by 5. However, the good news is you can produce compost in as little as 4 to 8 weeks. So that is a key benefit. In order to attain high heat levels enough to kill seeds and pathogens, you'll need to frequently flip the pile to provide oxygen to the microorganisms. You'll also need to keep adding ingredients so the critters have an adequate supply of food. Keeping your pile moist is also key to keeping the temperatures high. Keep in mind the hottest part of your pile is in the middle. When you flip the pile, remove the finer material to the edges, keeping the larger materials in the center. After you flip the material a final time into a third bin, let it sit for 4 weeks before applying it to the garden. You'll know when it's time to flip to a third bin if the pile begins cooling down, even with flipping, because most of the organic matter then has been broken down into humus. Remember to water your bin regularly, perhaps putting it into the rotation of watering your plants. Hot compost can make a lot of compost quickly, taking 4 to 8 weeks from start to finish. Hot composting requires more materials, more frequent monitoring and tending if you want to be sure you have kept the pile temperature within the range for long enough to kill seeds and pathogens. You'll get high quality compost if you have enough time, space, and raw material. Here is another method of creating compost employing the help of worms in a process called vermiculture, which many people enjoy because it's easy, it takes little space and effort, and produces nutrient-rich worm castings. Composting with worms, also called vermicomposting, is usually done with the common red wiggler worm, Acea fetida. This worm's specialized digestive system converts food waste and other organic materials to a nutrient-rich compost called vermicast or worm castings. It thrives in aerobic, that means with air environment, you need constant circulation around and within the bin. It's able to process large amounts of food waste and rapidly reproduce in a confined space. A well-tended wood bin is odorless. You can keep it in a pantry, a utility room, or under the kitchen sink. A garage or a basement or carport isn't a potential site. You can even keep it in an apartment. Worms thrive in temperatures between 55 and 77 degrees, so if you keep your bin outside, you'll need to protect it from extreme weather. The north side of a structure, such as a house, shed, or garage, is preferred because temperatures there don't fluctuate as much. The bin also needs protection from rain and wind. Remember, there are living creatures inside. Place it under the eaves of a deck or build a cover that repels rain but still allows good air circulation. An outdoor bin must also be secured against rodent, raccoons, and other animals that are looking for a tasty treat. Depending on your local climate, you may choose to place your worm bin outside during the warmer months and bring it under cover during cooler months. Be sure to place the bin in a place that you visit often so you don't forget to feed the worms. Avoid noisy or high traffic areas or the worms will want to escape because they sense danger. Making a worm bin is easy. Buy a plastic bin or use one you have on hand. Drill aeration holes in the sides, tops, and bottom. The worms need constant air circulation around the bin to thrive. Line the bin with mesh to keep the flies out and the worms in. A 1 by 2 by 3 bin handles about 6 pounds of kitchen scraps per week. Place shredded paper or wood shavings as the bedding material in the middle of the bin. Add some grit like sand or dirt and fill the bin about 80%. Add enough water that the bed is dripping wet and then put the worms on top and put the lid on tight. Feed worms the same sort of kitchen scraps that you would add to a traditional compost pile. Vegetable scraps, crushed egg cells, shredded paper, Don't feed them the same things that you would exclude from a compost pile, like meat, fish, and dairy products. Avoid citrus and onions, which the worms won't consume. The worms will feed up through the layers of food. As they feed, the bedding will turn into a dark, crumbly, nutrient-rich worm casting that will collect at the bottom of the bin. Vermicast, the product produced, is a mixture of worm castings and decomposed organic matter. Depending on what kind of food you are providing to the worms, it can be really wet when you remove it from the bins. You can sieve out the parts you don't want and let it dry before applying it. From start to finish, worm compost is ready in as little as 3 and up to 6 months. You'll know when it's ready as it smells earthy and fresh and looks like crumbly chocolate cake. Worm compost or worm castings can be used on your house plants as a slow release fertilizer. Put it on top of the soil as a dressing or blend it into potting soil. Use it outdoors on flower or vegetable beds. Apply a 1/2 to 1 inch to the top of soil. To feed shrubs or trees, apply 1 inch to 2 inches around the base of plants. Avoid direct contact with the stem or trunk because worm castings hold a lot of moisture and can create conditions where fungi or pathogens can multiply and invade the bark or stem of plants. As alternatives to building traditional compost piles or composting with worms, there are many ways to reuse plant materials and improve soil quality and provide nutrients to plants. Let's look at a few of methods of composting in place. Cut and drop or dig and drop. Do you maintain a turf grass lawn? It can be a lot of work, and generally we are faced with a lawn with brown spots that require a lot of water and fertilizer to stay green. Here is a tip that can save you time, money while making your lawn healthier. Grass cycling recycles the nutrients of grass by leaving the clippings on the lawn to decompose. They can decompose really quickly because they have a high water content, which evaporates after cutting. OSU turfgrass research tells us that over 20% of the nitrogen to keep lawns green can be provided by leaving grass clippings in place. Trench composting is the act of burying your organic waste directly into your garden soil. The advantage of this method is that it lets you compost meat, grains, dairy, and cooked foods in addition to other kitchen scraps. By burying them in a trench, you can also avoid the smells and rodent problems that these materials can cause in an open compost system. All you need is a shovel. Trenching is an excellent method to use in combination with growing annual crops, especially heavy feeding plants like cabbage, corn, and squash. Trenching creates an underground source of nutrient-rich humus for your plants. This is a slower composting process than an aerobic compost pile, but the trench materials will retain more nitrogen during the process, which is important for plant growth. Use a system to mark where you have buried your scraps so you don't accidentally dig them up. In fall, dig a trench 12 to 18 inches deep, fill to the garden bed level with food scraps or yard debris, cover it up with soil. In spring, turn the decomposed material back onto the garden bed. If it isn't fully decomposed, put it back and leave it longer. You can use the trench as a pathway during the growing season. When you harvest a crop or terminate a cover crop, leave the roots in the soil to decompose to keep feeding the critters. Leave the leaves on the soil to decompose. Cut pea and bean vines and leaves onto the soil. When you terminate a cover crop, cut it at the soil level and cut it into smaller pieces that will slowly decompose to feed soil organisms at the surface of the soil. Nearly every crop can be left to decompose on the surface of the soil, though some will take longer. If your crop has signs of disease or pests, remove it from the garden and dispose of it in the garbage. Otherwise, put the plant material right back into the soil where it came from and let it start the cycle all over again. Sheet mulching is a method that layers organic matter directly onto the soil, creating a composting garden bed where you want to plant. This method is great for converting a grass lawn or weedy spot or an area of your garden with compacted or poor soil quality. Layers of green waste and brown waste are stacked directly on the soil. The materials decompose in place over several months, enriching the soil and creating a nutrient-dense layer. The mulch suppresses the growth of weeds while improving soil structure and nutrient availability to plants. If weeds reemerge, add more mulch on the top and let the process keep going. After 6 months, you can plant right into the mulch, moving the chips aside as necessary to expose the soil. Here, alternating layers of grass and leaves were layered onto this soil, covering up grass. This was topped by 4 inches of arborist wood chips and left over winter. Arborist wood chips are ground up tree trunks and limbs which decompose really quickly. In the spring, the chips were moved aside to expose soil and planting began, and this now is a growing garden with flowers and vegetables. The final method we'll cover is green composting, or the planting of cover crops, which is yet another way you can feed the underground food web to improve soil health and nutrient availability for plants. Cover crops are fast-growing plants that are used to improve soil health, protect soils from erosion, reduce weeds, improve water holding capacity of soils, and store carbon in the soil. You can plant in fall or in spring. Cut them down before you are ready to plant vegetables, leaving the roots in the soil. Essentially, you are using plants to feed the soil organisms, diversify and increase their populations, which in turn make nutrients more available to crop plants. Some examples of cover crops to use in urban gardens that are fairly easy to terminate include the lacy phacelia, which you can see attract our native pollinators. This is one that's great to use in the spring. Crimson clover fixes nitrogen. Don't let it go to seed or you will be fighting it coming back, but you can grow it over the winter and chop it down in the spring, and it adds nitrogen to the soil. Mustard is another one that it covers densely and is a great winter cover crop. Fava beans can be planted in the fall or spring. Sometimes they don't overwinter, but when they do, it is a wonderful plant for fixing nitrogen and providing food to pollinators. You can cut it off at the base and it will quickly decompose. Austrian winter peas are another nitrogen fixer. They're cold hardy. You can plant in fall or spring as a great cover crop. Buckwheat is a spring cover crop that grows very quickly. You can plant it and within 6 weeks cut it down and replant. Daikon radish is a great option for planting in fall or winter. It has very deep roots that can break up compacted soil. So get ready, go. Choose the right composting method that fits your composting needs and include it that you consider your scale of operation, available space, the time you want to commit, and the types of waste you have to compost. Every method offers distinct advantages, but all ultimately contribute to sustainable waste management and environmental stewardship while helping you improve your soil quality to grow things that you enjoy, from food to flowers. Here is a fun poster produced by the Environmental Protection Agency that summarizes the multiple benefits of composting. It reduces waste in landfills, recycles organic materials into valuable soil amendments, recovers nutrients and organic matter and keeps them local. It creates green jobs by composting at large scales. It extends municipal landfill life by diverting organic matters out of the landfills. It reduces soil density and compaction when we apply it to our landscapes, increases soil health and fertility. It creates higher populations of beneficial soil organisms in the soil. It provides improved immobilization and degradation of pollutants, reduces soil erosion, improves plant establishment and growth, and it can improve nutrient management, decreases stormwater runoff by improving water retention in our soils and infiltration, and importantly, sequesters 3 times more carbon when food waste is recomposted and applied to the land than put into landfills. Compost on your own, or if composting may feel beyond you, if you have a green recycling bin provided by the city, put your waste materials in there and it will back up into a compost pile. If you'd like to learn more about how compost not only benefits the soil in our gardens, but benefits our environment as a whole, there is much information available. For your reference, here are some sources of information used to produce this webinar and resources that you will receive following this webinar for you to explore. Now, let's answer some questions.
That's wonderful. And yes, Carol remembered to stop share, so she's visible.
Here I am.
That was great. You know, the co-host traditionally says that was great, but I was thinking about this, and maybe we should start with reminding our viewers that this information is available in our library.
Yes.
And we really hope that you will share links and contact information with your friends and family. Now, we are not webinar people that get money because of viewership, but a lot of energy goes into this. This particular presentation is probably the most complete, comprehensive introduction to home composting on the web right now. So you've got folks that are considering this. Send them a link and explore our other library offerings in the rest of the library. So now let's see. We did get some good questions.
Good.
We always get good questions. Um, a simple one, and you answered it, but let me ask it again. And that is, can my compost pile be in the shade?
Yes, your compost pile can be in the shade. Organisms are going to decompose wherever they have food and they operate underground. So if it's in the sun, maybe you have a slightly quicker decomposition process, but shade is fine.
Okay. Now, junk mail. Can I use junk mail?
You can use junk mail as long as it doesn't have plastic in it. And man, could that be a really big resource of paper? I know it is for me.
So is it green or is it brown?
It is brown.
And we need brown frequently, don't we?
We need more brown than green. Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. Um, so you mentioned, and we hear various levels of panic in especially the online community, but what's the advice on finding good compost, good safe compost for sale
Yeah.
if you're not actually producing enough for your.
Yeah, it is a great burning question. It's difficult. And the best advice is you only get compost from a company that has reviews online. However, even if you have a reputable company that you buy from, they're receiving materials from all over. And because some herbicides will withstand a composting process, you cannot be sure. And I can tell you that I have experienced it in a Master Gardener demonstration garden that we've gotten some compost that evidently has some persistent herbicide in it. You can buy some compost and test it. So planting peas in it will give you an indication. They will tell you quickly whether there's herbicides because they will be misshapen. There isn't a guarantee. Is it worth trying to do it? Yes. Is there a risk? Yes. We probably can't get away from that risk.
Okay. And so a municipal site will be recycling mainly from yards. A non-municipal site may be getting a lot of agricultural
Yeah.
debris. Is the agricultural debris more likely to have the persistent herbicides, or is it the
It,
home?
it, no, the agricultural sites are likely to have more herbicides because they're trying to maintain large properties, so the likelihood of usage is going to be higher of those chemicals.
Okay. All right. Um, what can you say about compost tea? And in particular, since master gardeners don't usually recommend this, is that because there's good information showing that it's not useful, or there's just not good information available yet?
That is not a question that I have done a lot of research into, so I'm not sure I can answer it. If you or one of our other master gardeners has an answer, chime in. Or
Well,
we can do, go ahead.
and we don't mind saying no at that point. We don't know.
We don't know.
I suspect it's because there haven't been good studies, and I suspect that behind that uh, is that so far nobody's figured out how to monetize compost tea very well. So
Perhaps.
keep looking for good information. Um, and dog or cat waste you mentioned, but let's be real clear.
Yeah, don't put pest waste into any type of compost pile. It could have parasites, it could have disease. So stay away from pet waste in compost.
And folks, what's behind that is that cats and dogs are like humans, high on the food chain.
Right.
So, and of course, hamsters are too. So, yeah. Uh, a question on cover crops. And again, this was beautifully comprehensive. This was great.
Thank you.
Um, Almost nothing that we saw as questions wasn't really buried in there somewhere. But cover crops, the question that did come up is if you use cover crops and you cut them down properly, which is really important because if you let them go to seed, then you're going to be fighting cover crop weeds for a long, long time. But you've done the right stuff and you've chopped it in. Can you plant your real crops into that bed right away, or do you need to wait for the chopped up material to start to decompose?
My experience, which we've done a lot of this in the Multnomah County Master Gardener Demonstration Garden for years, is you can plant in it right away.
Can you plant seeds or do you have to plant
You can
starts?
plant seeds,
Okay.
yes. And you need to be aware that it's a plant that's trying to grow, so you make sure that you are terminating it or you can fight it as you're trying to grow. But you just need to be diligent. Actually, putting the material back on the soil can um, keep them from regrowing because you're offering a layer of protection.
Right. I think that's important. The whole idea of cover cropping is probably undervalued. We
Yes.
also have good videos in the library on cover cropping if you want more exhaustive information.
Yeah, I will say that if people are interested in cover cropping, small farms are adopting this practice because it's less labor for them and they plant, many of them will plant cover crops, cut them down, and immediately plant. Now, they are probably planting transplants, but there are many small farmers that can share practices that they have a lot of experience at a larger scale, and it's a great place to get information.
And watching your presentation, I know that you are deeply involved in the Multnomah County Demo Garden.
Mhm.
And the other county chapters, both in our immediate area and across the country, Master Gardeners are frequently involved in demonstration gardens. Sometimes these simply show, yes, here's demonstration that this particular plant will grow in our area. But a lot of times, and I know your demo garden is heavily into trying different strategies and making these available to the public.
Yes.
So, yes, definitely, folks, do look into Master Gardener demo gardens.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean that is the wonderful thing is it's a demonstration garden and oftentimes, as you said, there isn't in-depth research available on trying different methods of growing things, and that is the benefit of trying them, demonstrating to people and learning as we go. So, yes.
One last comment, and it's a comment rather than a question. But I remember most frequently when I was answering phone questions about composting, I'd get a slightly odd question, but I get it frequently, and that is my compost never seems to actually be composting everything. I put in a banana peel and I notice I still have a banana peel. And it took me a long time, and then I learned to ask the question, do you just have a single pile? And when the answer was yes, and they're putting in a banana peel every 2 days, there's always a 2 day old banana peel.
True.
So this was, Carole, excellent presentation. Viewers, this was our last presentation for this season. We will be back in the fall with more wonderful stuff. And join us then. Thank you, Carole, very much.
Thank you, everybody.